Despite our aging skin and our tiring eyes, elements of optimism guide us through our lives. And relative comfort, shit still hits the fan. Nothing to clean it with. We're forced to improvise.
It's the Lyrical Wax.
Those were the lyrics of Nick White, singer, guitarist, songwriter of the band Jono's Mate Sheep. My name's PurpleZain, Gold Coast / Tweedheads musician, singer, songwriter and producer. But in my normal day-to-day life, I'm actually the head honcho of Chill Psychology. This is the Lyrical Wax podcast, where I combine my love of music and lyrics and songwriting with a little bit of know-how around psychology. So here we go, the Lyrical Wax podcast, Jono's Mate Sheep edition. Let's go. Hello, Nick from Jono's Mate Sheep. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Zane. How are you, mate? Thanks for having me on.
I'm very. My pleasure. I've been doing a few now, slowly working through a few guests. Really been enjoying the first couple I've done, and I think this will be an enjoyable one too. You and me have some pretty good funny chats here and there, so we can actually do the couple of mates at the pub going, oh, let's start a podcast, eh?
I've been thinking about that for about 8 years, so it's nice to be able to pull it off.
Yeah. So here we go. We're on our own. We're on a podcast right now. It's really happening, Mum. It's really happening. Alrighty. So, Nick, Whitey. Sometimes people out there, sometimes I call him Whitey, sometimes I call him Nick. In my phone, he's Nicky Sheep after Nicky Six from Motley Crue, even though he's not the most heroin shooting, outrageous, hair dyeing, spandex wearing person I've ever met. You're definitely not Nick. You're very opposite to Nicky Six, but that's kind of why I like the nickname Nicky Sheep. Okay, so that brings me to the first question that I got to ask, and every single person out there wants to know the answer to. Jono's Mate Sheep is an incredibly interesting name for a band. You got to give the backstory of where your band name came from.
Yeah, I think from what a lot of people have told me, it's the most interesting part of the band because our music's pretty ordinary. So at least we got that going for us. But so basically the name Jono's Mate Sheep goes back about probably 13 or 14 years from when I used to work at this kebab shop in Bendigo. And the kebab shop was like a late night sort of cafe thing, open to 5 a.m. And it was obviously where all the drunks would go after a night out. And so, yeah, but yeah, Sheep used to come in. And I didn't know Sheep personally at this point. I sort of got to know him a lot throughout my days. I would have been like 19, 20, still at uni studying and stuff like that. And he used to just come in real drunk. And my mate Jono was working in the kitchen and he'd be like, Jono. And Jono was like, I didn't like that bloke in high school and I don't like him now, so I don't know why he wants to talk or anything like that. And it just became this ongoing joke about like, well, he's your mate, Jono, so you gotta go out and talk to him. So basically the whole crew would be like, yeah, he's gonna be out in a minute, Sheep. He's gonna be out in a minute. And it just became this big in-joke kind of thing, and Jono would go out and have a chat with Sheep. And anyway, 14 years later, I don't know if I've told you this story personally or not, but we organised a gig in Bendigo, like where I'm from, for the first time the other day, and this bloke I was emailing to organise the gig, James, halfway through the first couple of bands that had played, Jono's there watching us play, and he goes, do you know that Sheep works here? And I was like, what? And turns out James, the bloke I've been emailing to organise the gig, was Sheep. And I actually the night
That's
before
his
in
real
Melbourne,
name.
they were like, someone asked me what's the go, like what happens if you meet. Yeah. And someone asked me though, like what happens if Sheep finds out? Like, cause you sort of this big joke thing. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I actually don't know where Sheep is or what he's doing and stuff. But I put it to him and I just said, look, I don't know if you've made the connection yet, Jono's mate Sheep, but the band's named after you. And he bloody loved it. He's like, turned to his staff and that, and he's like, oh, there's a band named after me. And me, Jono, and Sheep got a photo together at the end of the night. And then, yeah, it was happy days, and he gave us permission to use the because I was a bit worried about that if we blew up, whether he would sue us for, you know, some kind of defamation case or something. But it worked out well.
That would. I don't know what the outcome of one of the, this isn't a legal podcast. This is a music podcast, so I don't know what if that would be possible. I'm more concerned a guy from Bendigo with the name Sheep that manages a pub. I'd be more worried about him just being that loves showing up to kebab shops at 3 a.m. I'd be more worried about him not suing you, but like just beating the crap out of you and humiliating you, like just putting you in a headlock and giving you nuggies and stuff and just being a total rough, tough bogan. That's what I'd be worried about.
See, everyone associates Bendigo with that type of person, but
but you're from Bendigo, and we're going to get into that a little bit. So but now that I got that out of the way, had to get the obvious question out of the way. But before we get into, so the Lyrical Wax podcast is about looking at people's lyrics and a little bit about them and how they relate to them. So it's important at the start of this to get a little bit of context, a little bit of history on the person. You've said you're from Bendigo, born, and so you're born in that county or that area and went through high school there, and even did you go to uni in Bendigo and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so born in Serpentine, which is like half an hour. Oh, so I was born in Bendigo, but grew up in Serpentine. Went to school at a place called East Loddon, which is sort of more of a school, about 200 kids, but kindergarten to year 12 or prep to year 12, whatever you call it. And it was more for all the country area or country towns around there. So like, you know how in some places you might have a school of 10 or 20 kids. That school kind of combined all those little schools back in the day. So, went to school there for the most part, did year 11 and 12 in Bendigo at just like a senior secondary college thing, and then did uni in Bendigo, and then ended up in Melbourne after my uni degree. So when I was about 22, 23.
Yep. And
so yeah, it was a good place to grow up. You couldn't get into much trouble. Teaching, I was studying at the time. So I did my teaching degree in Bendigo. And the best thing about, I don't know, yeah, I can probably say this, best thing about doing uni in the town you grew up in is the people, like a lot of your mates have already done the degree. So you can sort of use their assignments as support, I guess you could say.
Okay. Well, you'd be hard-pressed all these years later that the Board of Education of Bendigo University hears this and contacts you and strips you of all your degrees and everything else. You'd be very hard-pressed if that was the case. So you're probably all right to say that, Nick. So and just a little bit more. So you obviously
they'd be getting rid of a lot of teachers if that was the case too.
Yeah. And it's a little bit ironic because every kid loves copying his mate's homework. And I'm thinking that don't tell the teacher and let every kid at school know that every teacher actually did that themselves. Yeah. So there's a bit of irony there. So you're a farming family, like, or your dad owned the local ride-on lawnmower business. You know, what was that like? You know, brothers, sisters. Was it one of those huge 12 kid families all sharing the same bath water? Because I'm asking this because some of your lyrics a little bit later, I'm sort of trying to get a bit of backstory. I'm going to relate it to your lyrics. But yeah, or was it one of those big manor houses out on the, 200-year-old stone houses, out on the farm somewhere with 10,000 acres and...
Well, I think I was always jealous of the people that did have those massive stone houses and lived on acreage. And so, yeah, Dad was a farmer. And Mum worked at the local roadhouse for a bit and then the local shire. But we never actually grew up directly on the farm. My grandparents owned the farm. I only had one younger sister, Jessica. And yeah, it was it's a classic place to like grow up. But the farm was pretty much like run by the family, and but it was a little bit later than the days where you'd have 8 to 12 kids. I think we were sort of that generation where people couldn't really afford too many, and most of them, like me, didn't end up running the farm anyway. So it wasn't really a clever investment having that many kids. But
Okay.
yeah, it'd be interesting. It's interesting how you're building that background because some of the lyrics probably do sort of tie into that type of stuff, but we'll see. It's not
Yeah, so
half based
we
on my
won't.
family, and then half of it's just.
But don't let the truth get in the way of a good song lyric. So, getting into the like songwriting and stuff a bit. Did you used to go to the the local county fairs, and there was like Lee Kernaghan there, or like what got you into playing guitars? What got you into playing guitar, songwriting and stuff? When did that sort of come along?
Well, it's actually not probably not the most exciting part of the story, to be honest, because that actually came a bit later. Um, Playing guitar, like I didn't start playing guitar till I was 18. But there definitely was. I remember at East Loddon, Troy Cassadaly did a concert. Actually, it's weird how you remember some stuff of your childhood. I remember being like horribly sick that day, but there was like a country music fundraiser for some reason. I know Troy Cassadaly was the headliner, and there was other, like it was like a mini country festival, but there wasn't that much live music around. Like a lot of it, I remember like Christmas growing up was Aussie Christmas carols. Like just all the classic jingle bells and all that, but in an Australian version, like, dashing through the bush in a rusty holding you, like you probably heard that classic.
Yeah,
So,
well, I haven't heard
and
that in
then
40 plus
my
years, but
first
yes.
experience of like, my main experience of live music though was probably my family, after about 30 to 40 cans of rum, like singing that. So there wasn't that much musical influence early, I wouldn't say. Definitely a lot of Lee Kernaghan on the CD, a lot of Cher, Shania Twain. But I think I just started playing guitar a bit later when I kind of figured out what it was. Like I was more of a sporty type of kid, and then sort of got a bit over. I was never very competitive. Like I enjoyed playing footy, and I went all right, but I wasn't like someone that was determined, or I didn't really like getting hurt that much either. So it wasn't really made for me. So when I figured out you could try and learn guitar, I started doing that. And, and then I met a really good mate of mine, Brendan Smith, who that was like my first band, Old Violet, was with him, and we sort of moved in together, and I could only play like a little bit of finger picking stuff. And first song I ever tried to learn, I think, was Hero by Enrique Iglesias. And that's kind of like that little finger plucking thing. So I sort of learnt that, and then I just kept finger picking. And because it was too hard to learn covers, I just started making shit up. And because we lived together and we had the guitars out all the time, we just sort of grew together and just started making music. So yeah, that's sort of how it came about in the end, I guess.
All right, cool. So that's how you started playing guitar, because you just got sick of getting hit in the nuts by cricket balls. So once you went from Bendigo, from the country to the big city where people are bowling 140 kilometres an hour, but with no accuracy though, unfortunately. That's why they're in the third grade, not playing for Australia. Started playing guitar. What about this? What about the songwriting stuff? Did that come naturally with the guitar playing, or did you learn guitar and you thought, oh, I'm playing guitar, I better start writing lyrics, or you just thought, oh, I got stuff I want to say? Like, how did the lyric writing come along?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think that definitely came later. Like in the first band, in Old Violet, it was my mate Smithy, who I was talking about. We moved in together. He sort of already had like this. It's actually funny. Before I met Smithy, I knew he was a bit of a songwriter, and he's a pretty cool, good looking dude. And I was like, I knew him through friends of friends, and I was like, oh, I really want to get to know that guy because I wanted to start playing music and stuff. And by the time we actually met, caught up, got to know each other, he already had like a catalogue of songs. So, and we did that band for probably 3 or 4 years or something, around Bendigo and Melbourne and stuff. And yeah, it wasn't until later, probably till I moved away, Old Violet got a bit trickier to be in just because, you know, when you're younger, like you're all there in the same town. And after a while, our drummer Simon moved away, and then it just sort of, everyone's lives just sort of went in different directions. So it wasn't until afterwards, I guess, that I started writing lyrics. And yeah, I don't know. I think I was just drunk at home one night. Like when I moved to Melbourne, there was no one to sing the songs for me either. So I just started like making stuff up a little bit by myself. And I think the thing is I got big on lyrics early is because I was a really, really shit singer. So I figured that if I can at least write good lyrics, people will respect the story and like listen to the story. So I started trying to work on the lyrics more so than anything else.
Okay, well, I suppose that makes sense because, you know, I often think that, no disrespect, rest in peace, Frank Zappa, but, you know, Frank Zappa was the most kookiest lyricist and incredible musician, but, you know, he wasn't really that good a singer, but he just did what he did and made it work, and it was great. And like the Frank Zappa sound is the most, you know, it's such an iconic sound. But I'm sure if he was alive today, he would probably say that his singing wasn't really that good, but he just did lots of other stuff to compensate for it. You know, his quirky lyrics, his incredible musicianship and band members. So I can understand that. Yeah. And the fact that I also am not a very good singer, I can definitely understand that. Okay. So that brings us to the sort of the next bit of the part two, the second act of this podcast. We actually dive into some of the lyrics you sent me through. You sent me through some pretty interesting lyrics. Well, some of them are introspective. Some are introspective on behalf of other people, I'd imagine. But there's definitely some stuff here that I would definitely like to ask you about what you were thinking. So we're going to open with the world's tiniest house. How this works, I'm going to read a little bit and then maybe give a little bit of my impression or some things I think are kind of poignant, and then maybe give you a chance to defend yourself, rebut, laugh, whatever. So the world's tiniest house. Well, maybe I say that because if it's about someone who actually is real and they're not impressed by the lyrics, you might need to be able to defend yourself. But Jono, Sheep actually liked it, so you didn't have to defend yourself from getting beaten up by him. Okay, so here we go. The world's tiniest house. This is some interesting lyrics. A family with 6 kids squeezed into the world's tiniest house. They had a dog, it starved to death. They couldn't afford to feed it. So we're painting a very, very bleak picture. I'm just thinking that Forrest Gump with little Jenny in the the real Povo farmhouse, just struggling. The first question is, you know, who is this family? Are they real? You know, and if they're not a real family, you know, where did this story sort of come from?
Yeah. That's why it's cool lyrics, isn't it? And I know you specifically said don't try and be cool and cryptic because the point of the podcast is to talk about your lyrics. So I'm not going to try and be cool and cryptic. But they're not specifically real, but like I think the thing is with lyrics, I reckon like because that song actually came to me. I was actually lying in bed one night. It was probably like close to midnight, annoyed that I couldn't sleep, and may or may not have had a couple of beers or something like that. And, you know, do you ever go to bed sometimes and your mind just explodes with ideas?
Yeah, a blessing and a curse.
You know what I
mean?
Yeah. In this case, it was a blessing because I reckon, like, I feel like that's one of the most like that song's one of the band's sort of favorites. Like not not just that one, but for its own reasons. But the initial lyrics sort of came into melody in my head, and I just thought I've got to write that down. And then the whole song just sort of flowed after that, like first little bit. But looking back on it, I reckon there were a couple of families that come to mind, like probably one in particular that lived across the road to where I grew up in Serpentine. And I remember they moved in when I was about maybe 10 or 11 or something. And yeah, I guess you would say they were quite poor and stuff. And, one of the girls is probably or she was my age. She was in class, younger brother, played footy with him. And there was quite a few siblings and stuff. But I think it was kind of just more like mashing their story, and they did have a lot of I guess they had a lot of trouble. Like from what I understand, getting to know the family a little bit over time, they'd moved around a lot. They had a lot of trouble with money, and so I think it was more. And I don't know if we're going to touch on these lyrics as well, like, but later in that verse, it kind of talks about like one daughter sort of breaking through and like developing a substantial amount of wealth. Well, that's kind of more like one got to university and got a stable job, and the family's proud of them and stuff. But I guess for those, like, knowing that family and stuff, they were just sort of, as time went on, still just really, really struggled through life and stuff. And that was sort of that.
Yeah, so that is the second stanza. The second youngest girl made a name for herself, developed a comparatively substantial amount of wealth. The rest remained in poverty, engaged in recurring battles with problematic drug use and disturbing thought patterns. So that is the first two lines, the girl the girl that was the same age as you, actually, that's true.
Like, not exactly, actually. Nah. I'm trying to work out how true I should be. No, that it's sort of mostly fictional, but I think, like I said, like looking back on that story and why it came to me, like I do quite think about that family quite a lot, like just how, I think they sort of set the premise, and then, but not in that case, her part of the story wasn't entirely true. It was more just representative of like, that one family member that kind of makes her way through, gets the education. But I think like, being a psychologist and stuff, statistically, it's not a lot of the outcomes of people's lives are sort of more about the family they're born into. Not so much the education they get, or, and I think that was more like the lyrics are more just to sort of, like, yeah, she broke through and did all right, but the rest of the family is still really, really struggling. And I think that one family sort of set the premise maybe, but there's a lot of families I know from that time growing up in Serpentine. So it's kind of like meshing them all into one character, I guess.
Yeah.
Or one family.
A few things there to sort of reflect on, like a lot of story writer, whether it's especially like you read about playwrights and movie writers and book writers and stuff, they often talk about characters are a mishmash of their history and people they know, and even parts of themselves, or part of their siblings. So it's not uncommon for songwriters to sort of take things from people that they know and blend it into fictional characters. Coming from that more psychological point of view, yes, it is true that, it's as much as it pains to say it, socioeconomic status has a lot to predict about your future socioeconomic status. And to a certain degree, I think you've sort of said it in this song that there is just that one that breaks through, so quite a few kids, there's one that they just decide they don't want to be poor, or they want to get out, and they work hard, and they got a little bit of brains as well, thankfully, and quite a lot of motivation and self-determination. They break through, and they're always heralded as like, yeah, that's the one that made it. But what often isn't acknowledged is that, yeah, so the one that made it, but then the other ones often do remain, poor and stay in that unfortunate, that bubble of poverty and so on. Yeah, so yeah, quite poignant. And the other, sorry, go on.
I don't know. I was just going to say it's the lyrics sort of encapsulate, like, I'm not saying Serpentine itself is like that, but I guess it's kind of like a representation of growing up in that community where a lot of families would move because the rent's really cheap and they could actually have a house and their family could fit into it and stuff, and whereas Bendigo, Melbourne, places like that, you sort of, bit hard to find a 4 or 5 bedroom house for $150 a week.
Yeah.
So
understood. There's the next line that I've highlighted. You sort of touched on, and I sort of want to come back to that though as well. I think this is the chorus, the way it sort of seems to be written. But I try not to think about those types of things, but I can't help but think about those types of things. So would you like to expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So that chorusy bit is probably definitely more about like my thinking style, I suppose. And I think sort of like what we've been talking about, like I was sort of like, it's like, yeah, one family member's going all right, but then they're sort of carrying around this feeling of like, well, yeah, I've made it through, got a successful career or whatever, but the rest of my family is still struggling and there's nothing I can do about it. And the chorus is more sort of me going like, I try and avoid thinking about those type of things because, I guess I do think a lot about that sort of stuff, or especially when I was younger, like I would feel a lot of empathy for people, whether that's like a homeless person or a family that's struggling. So it's kind of like saying, yeah, I try not to think about it, but I can't help but think about it because the world's kind of a dark place, and so most of the time it's not really for anyone's fault. It's just the family they're born into, I guess, or that's just how what's it called? The way their cookie crumbled or something. I wish I had a better metaphor for that the other day.
It's not the most empathetic metaphor, but it is sometimes in psychology. You got to be quite brutally blunt to people, don't you? And just got to go, well, that's the way the cookie crumbled. You can sit around and whinge about it and cry about it, or just go, well, this is it. So let's deal with what we got, right?
Here I am talking about how empathetic I am, and I'm just dropping that on.
You got to read the room before you throw stuff out like that. Some people don't take it too well, but some people actually appreciate it. Yeah, so good point. Look, there's a really the second verse, I'm guessing it is. There's a pretty brutal line, but I want to read it because this is about lyrics. Well, a man in his mid-30s was found dead the other day. That's the opening line. I won't go through. But it skips to his daughter was unborn at the time, but she continues to ask, what did Daddy's voice sound like? And why won't you tell me how he died? So before I ask, like, I'm assuming, based on what you said before, that's not a real person. And that's pretty freaking brutal. Like, it's got a beautiful, melancholic poeticness about it, but, what? That's like, where did you pull that line from? Is it about a real person? If not, where'd you pull that from?
No, so that part of the song is true. Like, it is about a real person.
Oh, okay. Right.
And it's still, I never actually realized this looking back on it, but like the whole song is kind of about where I grew up. And the first part sort of sets that premise up of this family, and they're not actually connected at all, but The second part, like I just remember the bloke that died, and he was, yeah, like mid-30s or, um, and yeah, like when he did die, like it was a really, really heavy moment for that community. And like I wasn't even living in Serpentine at the time. Like I was up here, so it was probably, like I hadn't lived in Serpentine for like maybe 10 years or something like that when it happened. But my mum rang me, my dad rang me, and they weren't that close with this family either, but it just completely rattled the community.
Mm.
And yeah, so he had a, was it, yeah, so it was a weirdly beautiful story, but like I used to play footy with him, like it was probably like 6 years older than me, 7 years older than me. And, yeah, I think he'd always had his struggles with mental health. Like I'd never known him really closely, but you know, you'd cross paths
Mm.
in those family farming communities and stuff. And then, yeah, I think from what I heard afterwards, like he'd always had his battles with mental health. And then, yeah, by the time he got to his mid-30s, he'd sort of had enough, and he had a pretty good life, and he was married, and I think he might have already had a couple of kids, and he had a daughter on the way. And, so yeah, that part's just about him never getting, or her never getting to meet her dad. And, um, sort of like as she gets older, figuring out like why won't, because I know like with, you know, um, suicide and stuff, not really talked about. They try and protect a lot of kids from that. And I've even worked with kids that have been through that, through my work and stuff. And it's not until they get a bit older and cognitively able to go, hang on, like what's actually going on here? So that's kind of like the daughter sort of realizing what's actually happened and going like, why doesn't anyone tell me what's going on or what happened to him? Um,
Mm.
so yeah, so that it is a heavy, it's very heavy, but I don't know, I kind of like it too because I don't know, like no one in Serpentine probably knows that that's the case or like that it's about that person. But for me, it's like a nice little, well, yeah, I think it's a nice memory of that person. Like he definitely hasn't been forgotten. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I can see that. You know, there's not. I wouldn't see that, especially hearing you talk about it in context. It was someone who you knew and played a bit older, and that's, you know, but still someone like small towns, small communities. You know everyone. You play footy with people that are a lot older than you, and so on. So I think it is a nice. It is a nice tribute. You know, it's super sad and super heavy, and but it's someone can stay alive in lyrics. That's nice, you know. And you'd like to think as a young girl gets older and she matures more, you can sort of she will learn a bit about her father and learn about that sort of stuff. But that's right. When some girls only, you know, a child of such a young age, you know, what the cutoff age is where you can actually talk a bit more frank about things. That's probably up to the parents. But at someone such a young age, you don't really want to tell some 3-year-old kid that their father committed suicide. You know, it's not an appropriate conversation. So yeah, and
yeah, yeah,
yeah, you know, this
no,
is obviously got some psychological components. This, but if this isn't, I'm probably not going to go too much into the conversation around suicide and suicide prevention because this isn't, in a sense, a therapy session, and it's just about having a, you know, look at your lyrics and so on. So I'm sure for some people out there might be thinking this. I'm not. Let's say I'm not trying to dodge the issue in the conversation. But I'm wanting to review the lyrics and so on, and they'll probably have to put in, and rightfully so, that, you know, if some things are a bit triggering to anyone. There are some links we'll include in the YouTube bio around, you know, some of the things you can look up if it's a little bit too much for you hearing this sort of stuff. But it's good that we can talk about it in an open, frank manner because, as you said, especially in country or rural towns, you know, this sort of stuff isn't really talked about. So it's all part of having people develop a better
yeah,
understanding of it, isn't it?
no, and I hope that's all right to,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's what the lyrics are about, but yeah, I hope that's all right to sort of touch on that sort of stuff. And I
No,
think it
I think,
was also like carrying that like melancholic sort of, well, yeah, I guess it's sort of part of the heart of where I grew up. And, I know a lot of people that do battle with that type of mental health stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, it's sort of for
Yeah,
a
no,
positive
definitely.
kind of outcome for people.
You wrote it
But,
in a respectful way. I can read that in the lyrics. So I think they will move on from that line to another song that's just going to totally pull the heartstrings. I'm absolutely certain. This song, nice segue, is called Sally Died This Morning. We are not laughing at the fact that Sally died this morning. We're laughing at the fact that it was a wonderful segue. And I will say, I try to tie a little bit of, even though this isn't therapy sessions, I will say in therapy and psychology with people, you've got to be able to have a laugh. You have to be able to sort of frame things in a way where people can laugh at the absurdity of some situations they find themselves in. Shake off the shock. And a little bit of humour goes a long way. My very, very first ever psychology supervisor years ago said to me, Zane, crack a joke, because if they don't smile, even just to be polite, they're truly depressed. So a little bit of humour goes a long way. And I'm a funny bastard, so if they don't smile when I crack a joke, they're freaking depressed. All right, so all right. Sally died this morning.
Oh, I love that.
So Sally died this morning. Here's some of the lyrics we got going here. Sally does not get visitors often, nor does she really leave her home. And the more that her age has lengthened, the more the distance has grown between hearing from her family and friends. When asked by son if she missed being young, she replied, I can't even remember the day that I got old, but it hurts and I cannot come and visit you all. So I tell you what, we're talking about some more melancholy, beautiful yet melancholy lyrics. We've got candidate number 2 right here. There's some more. There are some more lyrics I want to review, but it's the same question as last time. Sally, who is Sally? Is Sally real? If Sally is real, it'd be good to hear a bit about it. But if she's not real, where did this stuff come from?
Can I just say too, I'm like laughing and smiling because it's just really nice having someone like break your lyrics down like this. I've never actually reflected and spoken about it in this way too. So when I laugh, I'm like, it's kind of fun. Like I'm really enjoying the fact that people are like, you're appreciating this. So, but Sally's kind of like half true, but it's pretty much the amalgamation of my two grandmas. Nana Fat and Nana Skinny, they were called growing up. So they've merged into one character, but it's about grandma, or my grandmas. And I guess the funny part about the song is that, well, actually no, we'll start with where we're up to. So the point of that, the first part of the lyrics is, like my nana would, like she sits at home a lot by herself and not many people go to visit. Funny thing is she doesn't really want people to visit because she's more than happy sitting by herself reading her book anyway. Like her neighbours piss her off quite a bit, I think, by just like trying to, it's like, oh, she needs some company, and she's just like, they just bloody chew me ear off. I'm not lonely anyway. So that's where that sort of came from. The title, Sally Died This Morning, actually came from, so I was living in Darwin at the time, and I went to the Darwin Art Gallery, and it was actually a piece of art by an Aboriginal artist, I think, or it might have even been like an Aboriginal exhibition in that part of the art gallery, and the title was Sally Died This Morning, and for some reason it triggered like this, because me and my nana are really close, and it sort of triggered me like missing her, and then like imagining like what it'd be like if she did die, sort of thing, and just like not making the most of those opportunities to go visit when you can. Especially being like early 20s to mid 20s when you're just doing your thing and you're figuring out who you are, and you're just like, take it, just doing whatever you want for yourself because you got that ultimate freedom for the first time. But that's what sort of triggered the idea, and then the song sort of came out of that.
Yeah, I definitely see the social commentary of, sort of forgetting the elders, shipping the elders off to the old people's home, a bit of out of sight, out of mind. And, everyone feels a little bit guilty. They should be visiting their nan or, their mum or calling them up. But we don't. So that's definitely a social commentary that I think a lot of people can relate to. And obviously enough for you to sort of want to write about it. There's a couple of little lines here too that I just, I like your colloquial Australianisms, Nick, and being from Bendigo, it's a lot more probably built into your vocabulary than maybe us Gold Coast people. By shit, the kids are grown and they are bloody stoked. Like I can just hear that accent just dripping from that line. Before I gotta have to lighten up a little bit in the middle. There's a line that goes, she sat her glasses down upon her Monday Herald Sun. Now I know you quite well, and I know you're a bit of a lefty. Was your nan like a full Herald? Like, and then I don't know, people who know the Herald, everyone knows the Herald Sun is, but it's a general right-leaning paper that just uses football to draw the masses in. But was one of your nanas like a full sort of, some sort of the Nationals country people are often, vote National, what's a traditional conservative right party. Is there like something here, are you like the black sheep of the family, Jono's black sheep of the family, where you got a bunch of National voting farmers and you're like the Labor guy, or is there something there we can get into? That's an interesting one about you, mate, if I can ask.
There is, I mean, like I said, with that being both of my grandmas, like the story's based on both my grandmas, not so much the Herald Sun, actually. Like the Herald Sun was it's just what I grew up with, was the Herald Sun. And then my grandpa, when he was alive, so this is talking about my mum's side of the family, right? Like my grandpa had always bet on the horses. He loved the Saints, like me. And he had the Herald Sun, and that was just the paper they'd get. Like the Herald Sun was their go-to. And I just remember that growing up because I'd just grab it, turn it over to the back, and then it's just footy, AFL obviously, and then in cricket season it's cricket. It was just like a section. It just felt like back then the thickest sports section of all time. Like maybe looking at it now as a bit of a lefty, as you say, maybe it's unhealthy to have such an obsession with sport because maybe they're a little bit too involved and maybe ruin some athletes' lives or whatever because that's all they talk about. But I just loved that growing up. So it was more just a memory of like the Herald Sun sort of growing up and stuff. But I guess you could say we're not a very political family, but there's been some moments. Like I definitely think like me and my dad, buddy, get along like a house on fire. But he would never vote for the same party that I vote for, that's for sure. And we've got some different perspectives, but it's not really something that comes up. My family might. Maybe you should interview my family though and see whether they think I am the black sheep. I don't know.
Yeah,
so I've got no problems with them. maybe that's why I haven't been invited to Christmas for a while. I don't know.
Oh, here we go. We're going to get into some real deep and meaningful, are we? Okay, so I thought that'd be. I thought that might be a little bit. I wasn't really planning to go super deep on the Morning Herald Sun, the Monday Herald Sun, but thought it'd be worth bringing up. I just want to say the last line it's just worth reading out. Don't really have to comment on it too much, but this podcast is about lyrics. So I want to read this one. And Sally died that morning. Her funeral is on Thursday, and they will drive for miles to see her now. So yeah, nice. Nice line, because that's what we do, don't we? Like, oh shit, it's the funeral. Now we're definitely going, but hello, wake up, motherfucker, it's too late, you know? But yeah, so it says so much about that whole situation, doesn't it? You know, you will drive hundreds of miles to go to a funeral when they're not even alive to talk to, but you're not going to go do it when they are alive, and you're going to get some pavlova off them and stuff like that, are you? You know, so yeah, quite a good social commentary, I think.
On that note too, just a little funny side note on that one. I remember when I released that song, both my grandmas were still alive, and actually uploaded a photo of like, especially like my nana, who I'm really close with, and just said, "Oh, this is the real life Sally," and surprised she's still alive. And a couple of people had messaged me saying that song really hit them, and that they reached out to their grandma. They were almost a bit annoyed at me, because they're like, "What the hell? Like, we thought your grandma had already died." I was like, "No, she's still here." So she actually come to our gig in Bendigo and got to watch us play the other day, and it was like this really beautiful moment. So I guess looking back on that song too, a part of it was like trying to make the most of it, and now I feel like I have done that with her over time, which is great.
Please tell me your nan was there with the Wayfarer sunnies on and just knocking back the beers and smoking the durries, and then got into a brawl with sheep out the front later on at 1 a.m. Did that happen?
I would if she could, but I think she's just she's getting on a bit, so she just can't be fucked with the cigarettes anymore. Yeah.
All right, but she's at least drinking the little 6-ounce pots that all the rural Victorian nanas drink, and the pops drink. You know, the little 6-ounce beers. Was she on those?
I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit drunk myself when we were playing that show, and I'm not sure what she was drinking, to be honest. But she enjoyed the show, so she must have been drinking something.
All right, cool. Okay. So we'll move on to the next song, A Little Life. So this one, I think this one's about you. I'm going to read some lyrics, but I think this song's actually about you, not about some semi-real, semi-made-up people. A Little Life. We woke up in the sun for the first time in months, never felt healthier, but it was just the once off. You admit that you're a mess and you're battling to handle it. Hopefully it is just temporary. So that's pretty explicit. That it's about just being hungover all the time, and oh my God, we actually didn't get on the piss on Friday night. And you wake up Saturday, you go, "Oh, I feel great, wonderful, look at me go." But then it's like, oh, hang on, hope it's not temporary. Oh, sorry, hope it's just temporary. But so yeah, this song's about it's about being hungover and having, you know, just that one time that you wake up when you're not drinking, you're drinking so much, but then one time you wake up and you're not hungover and you're like super proud of yourself, and you're that meme with Arnold Schwarzenegger covered by all the animals and stuff, just thinking, you know, how wonderful and healthy you are. But there's a, but you're going to fall back into it eventually, and you sort of know you're going to fall back into it, and it's just this horrible cycle, isn't it? Right? That's where are we? Is this happening today, or is this 10 years ago, or has it been going on non-stop for the past since you left Bendigo, since you stopped playing cricket and became a musician?
I would like to say I've grown out of it, but I'm not sure that's quite the case. But yeah, no, it's definitely you're right. It's sort of that you pretty much nailed it on the head, but there is also that part of it, like that's sort of about, wow, how would I say it? I guess like admitting that you're a mess and you're battling to handle it. No, you pretty much nailed it on the head, to be honest. Like I know we'll probably talk about the other lyrics a little bit later, but I guess it's sort of trying to make the most of like the fact that loop just keeps going. And even when you do get on that, like waking up with the sun and doing everything perfectly, like you can end up hitting, um, similar barriers in life or whatever anyway. So trying to get that balance right between being nice and healthy and, also just enjoying yourself.
Yeah, and that's because the next sort of line I had highlighted is in relative comfort, shit still hits the fan. Nothing to clean it with. We're forced to improvise. So that's quite a funny line, but it's also quite poignant that in general we're living in middle class Australia, and life isn't that bad here. But shit still goes wrong for us. But what is the
That's
solution?
true.
We are forced to. A lot of people don't know how to deal with it, and you're trying to deal with things the best you can, but you are forced to improvise, aren't you? Like, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to improve my situation? Oh, I've heard about doing this. Oh, I'll give this a go. I'll join a gym, or but we are on the improvised trail a lot of the time, aren't we?
Yeah. And I think like a part of that song too is, I don't really write songs about love and breakups, but there is that part of that song that is about, coming out of a long-term relationship for me personally, and then other people I've met on that journey that might have been through that. And the relative comfort bit is kind of, it's like, you've got your life, you're both living together, you might be moving in this certain direction. And then whether it's you or the other person sort of has this change of mind. Um, so yeah, the shit hits the fan, and with nothing to clean it with, you got to improvise and wing it. And then you're sort of going through this path of life. It could also be like, someone dying in your life, and like all of a sudden, like you or me might think you've got it pretty well together, but you take away one of those sort of, pillars of your life, and all of a sudden things are very different. So that's kind of what
Mm.
that part's sort of about as well.
Yeah. Okay. So when you put it like that, I totally get that because I'm thinking relative comfort that compared to how people live in third world countries, Australians are living in relative comfort, but it sort of means doesn't matter who you are. Generally, life is pretty mundane and generally comfortable, but yeah, shit can hit the fan for whatever reason, and it throws us, doesn't it? Interesting. I didn't really pick up on
Yeah.
the girlfriend, relationship thing. I thought it was just a bit more of a general comment, but there's is there a little bit directed at someone's, their face just pops into your mind as soon as we start talking about this, about some was a
Not so
relationship breakup
much.
inspired. Sorry, inspiration for this
It's not
song, or
so
is it
much
just
like
again a
the
bit more of a general
relationship
thing?
that I had. It's more, well, I guess it's kind of tied in with it, but it's more like, people I've met, like even when I first met, like, our guitarist, Gooley, like he was going through a breakup, and that experience was like really, challenging for him at the time. And then I was in a long-term relationship, and then I went through a breakup. And then when I became single, you might meet someone, and then they've just been through that. And it's just kind of like, it's not specifically about someone, sort of like all the other songs, like you sort of amalgamate a lot
Mm.
of stories into, or merge a lot of stories into, um, probably a
Yeah.
better story because, yeah,
And I think it's an indication of, in a sense, good songwriting where you can write something quite specific to yourself, but the people listening to it can take out of it what it means to them. So,
yeah,
the song you might be writing specifically about an ex-partner, but then the person, might think, oh, that's got something to do with some friends from school or something, how that relationship, or just maybe even my
yeah.
job, how my job came to a
I
bad end,
remember,
and
do you
that
know,
sort of stuff.
yeah. Well, that's what, I remember, that song by Gautier, Somebody That I Used to Know.
Mm.
And I don't know where I read this now, but I remember him writing, sorry, I remember reading in a magazine, like him during an interview saying it's actually about something to do with him and his old business and evading the tax man or whatever. So that whole song, it seems like a love song, breakup song, or whatever that everyone associates it with, but it's actually about like this person that he used to be. And I haven't been able to track that article down ever to prove it to people. But like I've said it before, and people are like, "Nah, you're full of shit." And I'm like, I swear that I've read this somewhere. But that's the perfect example. It's like he's literally singing about himself and the tax man, and everyone else is like, "This is my like breakup song." And like,
I need to get him on this podcast and ask him and put him on the spot and find out what's going on there, if that's true or not, or just find me the article.
That'd be great.
The other thing in this song,
I would love to find the article, but if you can get him on, it'd be better.
The other line in this song, I definitely want to ask you about, because it's a very psychological word, and even though you did mention you did uni as a teacher, I know there's a little bit more to you professionally than that. I'll let you talk about that however much you want. But this line, where is it? Abandon all our schemas and our preconceived ideas. So I know what a schema is because I'm a psychologist, and you also know what a schema is because you wrote it. But maybe I'll let you open up about what a schema is, and to abandon all our schemas and our preconceived ideas. I'll let you sort of open up and like, what that means. Yeah, sort of what. Actually, no, I'll read the whole. It'll probably make more sense if I read the whole thing, the whole 2 lines. Abandon all your schemas and our preconceived ideas. Develop a new framework for interpreting the world. Diminish the intensity of the memories that cause us pain, and extract a little life from our suffering. So same question after I've read that whole stanza, what schemas are and how it sort of relates to what you wrote about and why you wrote about it.
Yeah, well, I think this is kind of where the the breakup part of it does come in, and it did come a part of that, like not so much the lyrics were specifically spoken by this person, but I met someone that had gone through a significant breakup, and it was very unexpected, and it was like after 10 years and stuff. And it's sort of, I guess, sort of like I've touched on already, like you're sort of imagining this world and this. So like a schema is like the ideas that you have in which you like perceive the world and like give your world structure. And I guess when you have those sort of schemas, like it kind of creates this safe world and it's predictable. And you've sort of just got this assumption that, like we've been together 10 years, we're going to have a family and stuff. And then that's all of a sudden completely gone in a relatively traumatic way. So you've literally just got to rebuild your whole life. So I guess that's where the developing new frameworks, like for interpreting the world, because the ones that you sort of had for so long have kind of been obliterated. So I guess it sort of comes down to that trust and what you want out of life too, because if you really value a monogamous relationship and you really want that family, like for that person, it's like if someone I've known so long and trusted so much is going to break those schemas apart, then moving forward, like how is that going to look, sort of thing. Sorry.
Yeah, because like for people listening in, like a schema therapy is a very sort of, one of my co-workers told me it's like cognitive behavior therapy on steroids. But you could probably, like what Nick said, a schema you could sort of say is what we sort of, a set picture of we sort of think how the world is. So like an example, you could just sort of like say, like if you talked about a schema of a house, you sort of think of that picture that you draw when you're 5 years old with the box and the door at the front and the 2 windows and the triangle roof and this is a very, very basic way of explaining it, but that's the schema of a house, you could say. So then, and by having that schema, it just makes life predictable and set, and we can keep moving forward, you know. So if a teacher goes, all right, kids, everyone draw a house, and they see it, but then some kid draws like some sort of snake pit with like, you know, the pits of Hades, and there's all snakes and beasts and monsters coming out of that schema would totally fuck with the teacher, you know. A and B also say a lot about what that kid's,
They would have to report
what's going on in that kid's life. Yeah, you probably have to report that.
Yeah.
So look, I don't know if that's the best example. People listening in, but that's sort of what schemas are and how they work. So when you talk about schema therapy, because I was sort of leading for you to say it, but I'm going to have to say it for you now. Nick actually, even though he started off as a teacher, he actually went into school counselling and now is actually doing psychology himself in the school system. So this is how he knows it and I know it. And to be quite honest, stuff that we yap on about when we're having a few beers on the weekend, a little bit. We talk about other stuff. To
be fair, despite being a psychologist, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I got some of those lyrics off Wikipedia though. So I think I learned about schema therapy. I learned about schemas during my study, but the actual I'm pretty sure I just Wikipedia'd that part. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I just sort of formed that into that story as well. But
okay.
And then another part of the A Little Life bit is actually sort of half based on a book by that
I wanted
same
to ask you about that.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I just said I wanted to ask you actually, you know, the title of the song. I probably should have opened it, but the title, A Little Life, and extract a little life from our suffering. So yeah, what's that line about?
Yeah, so just so A Little Life is actually like this really, really brilliant book. And it's very dark and it just doesn't have a happy ending, which is sort of I don't know, like I feel
like all your songs.
I don't deliberately like all my songs. And it's pretty much like read this book and I'm like, finally, main character dies and everyone's dead and it's like it's horrific, but it's also real. So I love that. And I think, when, you know, talking about like the schemas, and it's also a part of like growing up, I guess, this song, it's kind of like, you know, like we said before, you wake up with the sun, like you're trying to do all this thing. Like I remember reading all these self-help books in my early 20s and I'm like, I'm going to do the ketogenic diet and then I'm going to have bulletproof coffees or whatever and like do all these crazy things to like increase my performance. And then it's like, well, that's not really who I am. And I just don't really care. Like get over that part of it. And then, you know, you're sort of building these schemas and frameworks for your life and stuff. And then shit hits the fan anyway. And then you've got to completely upend that. And like even in the most stable, supportive circumstances, it can become difficult. And then I think I actually like that. There's this really good book I've got in there. It's called The Dictionary of Thoughts, and it's like a dictionary. Like every word has like a heap of quotes from the last couple of 100 years under it. And one of the quotes is like suffering. Oh, got to remember it properly now. Like existence is the extract of suffering. And I sort of turn that into like extract a little life from our suffering because your whole life is kind of, or a part of the experience is suffering. So, and that book, A Little Life, was kind of just a nice little way of bringing it all together.
Yeah, so that's actually a little bit of a psychological concept as well. Like the author of that book, was that written by like a psychologist or just someone? Because, you know, the concept of suffering is we're talking about different therapies now, ones that I'm not actually a total expert in either, just to top it off. But, you know, therapies like acceptance and commitment therapy, you know, sort of are based a little bit in like, you know, suffering, if you come into therapy to just end my suffering, I just don't want to suffer anymore, you know, that's a reasonable thing to say. But, you know, like what are you saying? You want your deceased partner to come back alive, you know, of course you're going to suffer because you love that person and they're not here anymore. So there has to be some suffering. It's just part of life. If you didn't, if someone you love, if someone you knew died and you didn't suffer, that means that you didn't care for them. So you got to accept the fact if you feel sadness or hurt or over something, it's actually your emotions telling you that was super important to you. And that's, it's a bit counterintuitive, but that's actually a wonderful thing, so a little bit of suffering, good for the soul.
And I think that's kind of that's it. And that's kind of the, I guess the idea, and that's like, that melancholic themes. And to be fair, like, I don't know if it's, I think like, studying psychology and doing that has taught me a lot and sort of capped off a lot of, things that I've sort of thought anyway. But I reckon I've always had that like melancholic kind of, theme running through my life for some reason, even since growing up. And I think a lot of these songs are about trying to understand the world for me and just being like, why do I care too much or like, think too much about these type of things or whatever. And half the time I'm talking to myself in these lyrics and going like, just extract a little life of your suffering. This is a part of the journey. like, so.
Yeah. I now that talking to you about these lyrics, I can definitely hear that theme running through your lyrics. It's a bit about, like even right up from the very first song, I don't want to think about these things, but I can't help but think about these things. I'm paraphrasing there. And even the fact that, you're singing about people passing away and dying, and then, so it sort of folds into what's the bit of the meaning of life and stuff. Why does this happen? Why does this stuff happen to people? Why is this happening to me? So I can see that theme running through your lyrics, especially now that we're getting into them. I want to move on to the next song, the last song, Chaos. So this is just some brutal death metal song, but is definitely not. You're the most non-death metal muso dude I know. I grew up with a lot of metalheads and punk rockers and stuff, but not really your thing. But you can still call a song Chaos, of course you can, especially if you like to be introspective and look into your own mind. So I used to be the change I wanted to see. Now I sit back and watch the chaos unfold around me. I'm questioning if it's wisdom emerging or if it's a state of helplessness that I've been learning. So I really like this juxtaposition or the, I don't know if ambivalence is the right word, but which one is it? Wisdom versus helplessness, acceptance versus being jaded, madness versus insight.
Have you had this experience yourself? Like, as you've grown up and gotten older, like
have I been accused of being jaded? Because I just come across
more
so
like that,
nonchalant.
Have you had those thoughts? Have you had those thoughts about whether you're becoming jaded and getting old, or are you just like getting wiser and going, this is how the world actually is? I get it now.
Yeah, that's actually, and that's what this song Chaos is about, and you sort of go on into it. And it's funny, I sort of was hanging with, I got a new staff member I've been working with that I've been, sort of helping out a little bit with, because they're so new to it, and, working in mental health, you need a little bit of supervision and guidance. And she will sort of say, oh, so worried I wasn't helping this client and so on. And there's more I should be doing. And I try and give her a little bit of reassurance. You're actually doing so much. And even though you're not saving their life or, rescuing them from themselves, the fact that she was unwell and you got her to hospital so that the doctors at hospital could take care of her meant that you did a lot, So I try to tell her that, I'm actually not jaded, but we can only do what we can do. We can only, control what we control.
Yeah.
So.
That's it. Yeah. Well, you have that, and that's what, a lot of like those lyrics in particular are about working that out. Because I have definitely been like that most of my life. And I think it's a really healthy thing as well, because you actually do have that that motivation to change things. Which a lot of people, I don't want to be disrespectful to a lot of people, but a lot of people maybe don't really have that sort of level of empathy or care. And that's why, it's it's great that people like that are actually getting into mental health. But as I sort of grew a bit older as well, like, it was probably I'm not into astrology at all, so but when I was starting to have these thoughts about whether it's wisdom emerging or a state of helplessness, I was actually seeing a psychologist at the time, and he said, "Oh, you're probably going through the Saturn return." And I was like, "What's that?" Never heard of it. And I looked up the Saturn return, and it's something to do with, like, when you're born, like, Saturn returns around 27, 28, 29. Saturn's returned to the same spot. And I looked it up. Apparently psychologists call it the quarter life crisis. Saturn return is like the astrology version, but regardless of what it is, around 27, 28, 29 for a lot of people, there's like these massive life changes, and it's probably, I don't know, it's your brain developing or whatever it is, but I looked it up and I was like, holy shit, this makes so much sense, because I was questioning everything. And as a young person, I wanted to, change the world and had these like fantasies about being a hero. Looking back on it now, that's probably more narcissism and grandiosity than anything else. But it was sort of like that transition point to where I'm at now. Not where I'm at now, but like just trying to figure out what's going on in my head and whether it's normal or not.
Well, you're a bit older than 27, but they do also say, not they also say, but the male, brain actually doesn't really finish developing till around that age. Different. If there's any neuropsychs out there listening, they might get in the comments and say, no, it's this age and that age. But in general, the male, the full development of the human brain doesn't really happen until you're sort of, late 20s. So it's kind of understandable that that's when people start to really probably get, you don't want to disenfranchise the youth and sell them their ideas are stupid, because, you need that youthful enthusiasm, and there's a lot of smart young people out there. But full brain development, like, that's why you can't drive a car at the age of 10, because your brain just isn't developed enough to handle that responsibility and make those informed, wise, decisions. So,
so again, I also don't believe.
Oh yeah, you can. Yes, no, you're the wrong person to have said that to. But like would you want a 10-year-old driving a car around the mean streets of like Melbourne, even Bendigo probably. But so that Quince like, so we definitely don't do astrology in psychology, because we're trying to be based in science. But to say something like Saturn return, and it also explains why a concept like Saturn return could mean something to astrologists, not because of the location of where Saturn is, even though that's what they might believe. It's just because of brain development sort of ends around that same time that Saturn has returned to that same place.
Yeah, and that's what I mean about I think like these lyrics at the start sort of are about like me having these sort of questioning thoughts, and it's like, we'll probably touch on those lyrics in a minute, but like, am I going crazy? Am I just growing up? And then like during that time, I figured out like, quarter life crisis, Saturn return, like it was a part of this learning journey that I guess you're starting to catch words to make sense, or even like, develop these frameworks and like schemas for your life moving forward.
If the song was called, like, Saturn return is actually kind of a cool name, but maybe not for your style of music, maybe for a psytrance doof song or something. It might be a better name. There's a couple other little, so we sort of spoke about the duality. Which one is it? There's a couple of lines that you said that I sort of thought might be worth expanding on. You say blissful ignorance. So I just had a question here. Do you think there's value in being blissfully ignorant and maybe naive to the ills of the world? Like, is it if you say someone's blissfully ignorant, it's almost like a slant but like, is it? I don't know what the right or wrong answer is. I'm just throwing it out to you because you wrote the lyric. Is blissful ignorance a slant, or is it actually there's some value in it?
Well, I think a part of that's like about myself. Like growing up, I was definitely blissfully ignorant and overly optimistic. And I think like these days, I quite thoroughly enjoy being a bit negative and having a good rant about things that I probably don't do that well myself anyway. So, it makes me a bit of a hypocrite, but I think like it's sort of about learning and going, I've learnt too much to live in blissful ignorance. So I can't be like, oh, it'll be all okay, like full positive mindedness. And then I haven't learned enough to change anything either. And they just spoke about before with like, I guess that's why acceptance and commitment therapy has become a thing too, because, some people have that mindset. Like you need to just accept things how they are, because when you think about things really deeply, it can be really overwhelming and like you can't actually change things. But the flip side is they weren't meant to be perfect in the first place. So maybe it's more our idea about the world that's the problem rather than the world itself being a problem.
I think that's 100% right. The world's just turning around its axis. Saturn's just spending 27 years to get back to us. So maybe it's actually our interpretation of it. Saturn has been around for 10 billion years. I don't know. I'm not an astrophysicist, but a very, very, very several billion years. I don't think Saturn gave a shit about us when it started spinning around the sun. And one last thing I wanted to sort of bring up in this lyric, because a lot of the other lyrics are sort of answer stuff already said, but question everything that I believe. So again, that line makes more context, but I would like, because I don't want to get too much into the heady days of COVID and social media, but people always say, question everything. But it was almost like, no, fucking don't. Some things don't question. Like, don't question. Well, no, again, I don't want to make this about. I don't want to go back to 2021 because it was fucking horrible.
To
but
again, it's sort of similar. Conspiracy van.
So it's similar to the other note. Like, is it like? I wrote this question I was going to ask you before I sort of knew more about your opinion of the song. Like, is it worth questioning everything? But based on what you're saying, maybe when you were younger, it was just about questioning everything, wasn't it? Where now it's just like being able to roll with things a little bit more is actually not that bad.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I did write that lyric before the pandemic. So I hope I haven't started some kind of weird movement by accident. I don't know if I'm like Rodriguez and have like this massive following of people to like question everything. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean question science and the vaccine and whether Bill Gates created the pandemic or whatever. It was more just like, well, again, I guess that like now that we're talking about it, there's a lot of similar themes that run through the songs I've written. But it's more like just your own ideas about things being challenged and going, like I guess I consider myself quite open-minded. So even if I am pretty certain that something's true, I'll usually listen to another perspective. And I guess we will go back to that pandemic day, like when the vaccine and stuff came out. Like there was that little part of me that was like, what if it kills me? Like you question it a little bit. You're like, and then I'm just like, we'll just see what happens, like at the end of the day, there's a bigger picture in the entire scheme of things. And if it, and then I'm sort of coming out the other side now. I'm like, it's fine. Well, the world's got its own problems now, but, so it's more just like, yeah, it's almost about like not having like too strong of an idea or belief, which I think sort of like what you're referring to, like if you question everything too much, that's almost a belief in itself, isn't it? Because you believe that everything should be questioned, but that's not really the point.
And that's the irony, you question everything, but then once you've made that decision, then you're on that path, and then you're not going to let another idea in. But yes, let's not get too hung up on that. Oh well, yeah. Throw in your last comment, then by all means, please, because it is about your opinion.
I was just going to say, like, it's funny when I started studying psychology, you do learn a lot of like critical thinking skills, and one of a really good mate who inspired me to actually do the degree. I was actually talking to him about it because I was having these like, I was just questioning everything. And I was like, do you just like think it's like overthinking really? And he goes, yeah. Yeah. He's like, basically I do question everything. And he goes, you just got to draw a line at some point and then just get on with it because like otherwise you just continuously, like you can find errors and faults in everything. But, so yeah, I guess that was my final, final little point there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You know, you can't. It's impossible to question everything, isn't it? So where does that line cut off? Where you just got to be able to let go and roll with things a little bit. Okay, so that is the analysis of the lyrics, and they're all pretty cool. There's some really like there were some punches to the gut ones too that are that I quite like. We sort of summarise it all a little bit at the end. I think in a way, the way we've been doing this, it's sort of the summary's sort of been happening and evolving at the same time. A lot of the stuff about, you sort of trying to work out your place in the world, what we've already sort of discussed. So maybe I probably won't talk about that too much, but, just about the future of the band, and your future lyrics. Where do you sort of feel, if you got some new, I'll give you a time at the end to do the plug for new stuff and new ideas, but, where do you sort of, have you got some lyrics that you're working on that you're about, or stuff, where do you see yourself going in the future? Like, have you got the answers now? You don't need to ask that sort of stuff anymore, so you can sing about beers and tractors like a good Bendigo boy.
It's funny, yeah, that's an interesting question actually, because I reckon like when the band sort of first started, I sort of already had these songs half written, or mostly written, and then, our guitarist Gooley joined the band and we started working on that, and then like the band sort of formed around the songs that were already there. And now so our drummer Millsy, like he's written a song. Gooley's writing a lot more music too. So we're probably working more as a team now, with the songwriting than we used to be. So we've got we're sort of planning on doing some recording at the end of the year. And even now, I think with our live shows, instead of it just being me like delivering my perspective, like there's sort of like a couple of older tracks there, and then we've got one with the drummer having a sing, and then so yeah, instead of it just coming from one angle, because I think it's tricky. Like as I've gotten a bit older, like I'm not writing as much, or I don't have as much like right now personally. Like I don't think the band would be as good if I just kept doing it, because it's just my perspective. So we're trying to incorporate different aspects of it. And if, someone's got a good song and it suits the vibe of the band, we're just going to play that. So, that's where that's kind of at the moment.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, singer-songwriters that put a band together, that's how it works. Everyone starts, the songs start off as the main person's song, but as the band gels and kicks on and everyone's, enjoying it and wanting to contribute, then it has to open up a little bit more, because otherwise you're just going to be, you're a Victorian, dictator Dan. But do you, will there be though, your lyrics are quite introspective and they have that emotional tinge and there's that melancholy and even some brutality in them. Are you going to say, Gooley, mate, you just can't sing about VB verse 2 he's nude, you got to sing about something a little, or write some lyrics that are a little bit more introspective, or are they sort of on board with that? Are you going to sort of try and manage that a little bit? Like, what are you sort of thinking there? Or are you going to have your own solo acoustic stuff like every other band does as well, that you can just do your more personal stuff?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, Gooley would drink anything anyway, so there's never going to be a beer versus beer thing. Well, actually, no, that's not true. He's probably the fussiest person I've ever met with beers, but he definitely drinks Tui's and BB. But I think there's definitely there's a vibe with the band, I think, that we have. It wouldn't just be writing anything, but I think the thing is so even Millsy's song, he works a lot in rural areas, and the song he wrote actually sort of like when he wrote it, I was like, that's one of the best songs I've freaking heard because it reminds me of where I grew up. But because he's got these different experiences, it's like I couldn't write that song right now, but he's written it, so it adds another dynamic to the band. And so it's kind of like as long as I guess if it's on theme and stuff, I'll keep writing the songs that I write. But they're probably always going to have that similar flavour, just at different points in my life. So having that outside perspective coming in just sort of adds a new dynamic to the band as well. There's a bit of stuff in the works, definitely, and it's definitely becoming more collaborative. But that's sort of where we're at the moment.
Cool. Well, all right, cool. Well, in that case, we will segue into the last bit then too, talking about the future stuff. So at the end of the podcast, there's always this opportunity for the guests to plug what they need to plug. I could lead you into a plug. You actually have a very cool little sort of merch thing at your gigs and so on about your lyrics and stuff. But I would like you to bring that up because I think it's super cool. But also, this is just an opportunity for the end, just to, any gigs or any sort of releases or anything you got coming up. It's all you.
Yep. Okay. So gigs wise, we've got next two shows. We're playing our first Brizzy show of all time on April 18th. Which we're really looking forward to. It's Stranded. You actually got us onto that venue, so we really appreciate that, brother. And we're playing our first show in Murbar as well, Murwillumbah, where Millsy, Debo, our bass player, and Gully are actually sort of from that area. So we played my hometown in January, now we're playing their hometown in April, on April 6th, which should be sick. And what's the merch thing you're talking about? Is that the lyric book? Did you say you were going to
release a little song book? Yeah, the little lyric book.
Yeah.
Did you end up did you put that together?
Yeah, so that's ready to go. I did. It's more of a digital copy at the moment just because I didn't have access to the printer for the last gig. But yeah, we've got it'd be nice to do that properly, but I think we're going to wait. I think we need a bit more content and stuff in it to actually make it worthwhile making it an actual book because it's quite expensive. And at the moment, there's about 9 pages in it. So or 14 pages.
Yeah, so...
but we've got some paper copies.
It's a funny little... Oh, yeah. Yeah, so paper is good, but it would be... Yeah, you got some really nice lyrics. So a little picture book or a lyric book with some pictures. We're from the CD. Well, I'm definitely from the CD cassette generation and so on. We're getting that lyric book and stuff is always so cool with some cool pics. And the fact that when you told me that you were... Because actually when we talked about having this podcast, it just sort of worked out so well. But, to give away a lyric book at gigs is cool, but to do it with some maybe... spend a bit more time and a bit more money even just to make it into an actual a little book would actually be a really, really nice little merch thing that I don't think other brands are doing. And
that's how you to steal that idea off you. Messaging me after that. Yeah. Well, I reckon it's really cool because we're sort of thinking the lyrics are important to our band. That's more our thing than you watch some bands and they're that freaking good and their music's that sick. It's just I can't play like that. But I was like, what's our point of difference? And being able to actually share the lyrics and stuff is really, I guess hopefully it helps people connect with it a bit more. So, but we've only played that one show and I didn't quite print off any paper copies in time. And the main reason was I had difficulty working out, whether it was going to print on the right side. And I sort of but we're definitely doing that for our next show. It's been awesome talking about him, and I think it's inspired me even more to make sure we can get it out there.
All right, cool. Well, we'll look forward to getting those into our cold, dying hands. So you can also write a song about that as well. All right, Nick. So I think the time has come to wrap it up, but I really appreciate your time. It was super interesting. There was some really nice stuff there. It was interesting hearing about it. And The fact that you know quite a bit about psychology and stuff made it a little bit easier for me to bring up a few things. I want to try and incorporate the psychology stuff into this as much as I can. So you definitely helped me make that easier. So thanks a million for coming in. Look forward to the 2 gigs you got coming out in April, Brisbane and Murwillumbah. And looking forward to the recording at the end of the year.
Appreciate it, mate. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Talk to you soon, mate. Cool. Thank you.
Right. See you, brother.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Lyrical Wax podcast. There's still more of these to come, but I'd love to do lots and lots more of them. So I'm doing a shout out to everyone out there still listening at this point in time. If you're in a band that you think can contribute some really interesting insights to this podcast, by all means hit me up. Or if you're just listening to this as a music fan, maybe put forward a band that you would like to see on this podcast and learn something about their lyrics. My name's PurpleZain. I got a fly buzzing around in my studio, what's very, very annoying. So I'll let you all go while I go murder this animal. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you all soon.
It's the Lyrical Wax. We pull apart the vocal tracks. Check the singer syntax. On the lyrical